Thank you again for coming. And we'd like to start all of these workshops that we do with just a little overview of some topics related to water conservation, because that is one of the big topics that we're dealing with our partnership with the City of Edmond. And so we're the Think Water group. So we're dealing a lot with outdoor water conservation topics for the state of Oklahoma. And we've partnered with a number of municipalities in addition to the general outreach topics that we do. But we've been working with the City of Edmond and really trying to focus on how can we help citizens of the state of Oklahoma to responsibly use water in a sustainable way. And so that's the focus on what we're trying to do is get information out onto how you can be as efficient and effective as possible in your use of water, especially outside of your home. And so even things like dealing with shady areas, that has an impact on how we use water. And so we want to help try to get some good resources out to the citizens of Edmond and to Oklahoma as a whole. So I want to start with a few quizzes. This will help get the mental juices flowing early in the morning. So if we look at typical water consumption in the city of Edmond during the winter time, it's typically about 8 million gallons of water per day. So that's in the winter. So when we come into the summertime, how high do you think that usage can go? Anybody have a guess? Triple, okay. So we're thinking maybe 24,000, okay. Other thoughts? 40? Feel like an auctioneer. I got 24, 40. Any other thoughts? Anybody think it's less than 24? Higher than 40? So some think higher than 40. Okay, so some are really thinking we're really exceeding that winter usage in the summer. So it is about 26 million is about what we see on peak usage within the summer. So if we look though at that change, that's all related to outdoor water use, right? So that's going to be irrigating landscapes, filling up swimming pools, even more car washing and things like that are going on. But again, things like swimming pools we don't always think of, but the evaporation that happens on the swimming pool can impact our water consumption. A lot of sprinkler systems come on, right? And Edmond has a lot of outdoor irrigation. So that is one of the challenges that we see when it comes to summer consumption of water. Okay, so now we're going to look at what's our typical consumption of water. So this is going to be across the state of Oklahoma. Over the course of the year, how much water does a person use in Oklahoma on average each day? So we've got 4 choices for you. Who thinks A, 53 gallons a day? So no one thinks that that's them? Okay, we got a few, okay.
You were not specific enough. For what specifically? For a person?
This is per person, but this is going to be all your water usage at your house, but it's sort of divided by person, right? So if you've got 4 people living in your house, clearly it's going to change, but this is a per person average, which is often how we look at water consumption. If we're looking sort of across a region, we're going to look at what's our gallons per person per day. So that just helps us look at averages. So 53, okay. What about 80? Okay, quite a few more hands. 185, a few there, 222. Okay, so a lot of people thinking 80. It is actually 185 gallons per person per day. So this is based on some 2010 data, right? And so that does change over time. That's the combination of our indoor and outdoor water use. And if you look at some communities that have really been working hard on trying to bring that number down, then you'll see that number getting down as low as maybe 110. Some communities in very arid areas that don't really practice any outdoor watering of lawns and landscapes and those types of things will get down maybe into the high 80s. Okay, so it is possible to drive that number down. But again, some of that is we look at the difference between our winter consumption and our summer consumption, and that gives us some ideas of how things change over time. So going back maybe to some things you thought about when you were younger, when you were in school, and we started talking about how much water we have on our planet. About 70% of the earth is covered in water, but only 2.5% of this is fresh water. and only about 1% of our fresh water is surface water that's accessible, and about 30% is groundwater. Okay, so the water we have, the amount that we use for drinking water and these types of uses is a much smaller fraction of that. We are also about 60% water, right? So we have a lot of water in us, and we have to have water each day in order for us to survive. Typically about 2 to 3 liters of water that we need in order to stay healthy. And we know that we can't survive for more than a few days without water. So just, essentially I think we know that water is important for life and it's important for each of us. And as we're thinking about water, we want to make sure that we're valuing water and giving it the proper value. So up until a few weeks ago, whenever it got real dry, maybe a month ago, it sort of got dry. Earlier in the year, we were seeing a lot of this still, right? So a lot of heavy rains earlier in the year. We were seeing flooding and these types of things. But I don't think we have to go back very far to remember the landscape looking a little bit more like this. So this is Lake Hefner when we had a severe drought, so right towards the end of the dry period that we were having in the early part of 2012, 2013, when we saw Lake Hefner really drawn down, lots of sailboats just sitting, on the banks with no water around them at all. Of course, we're back now to the right-hand picture, but we know that Oklahoma has a lot of volatility when it comes to our rainfall. We go through periods of wet seasons and through periods of dry seasons. And so this is from the mesonet, this tracks just sort of what our precipitation history looks like over time. And on average, we're typically about 34 inches of rainfall for the year in Oklahoma. So this is one of those years where we're certainly going to be exceeding that. And if you see each of these little black dots on the graph here is the rainfall for a different year. So you see that there's a lot of scatter in those black dots, right? We have a lot of variability in the amount of rainfall that we have. And we go through some seasons in green that are wetter periods and some that are drier periods. So we tend to have these changes over time of wetter and drier periods. And we seem to be in a little bit wetter period right now, but we know within the next few years we're going to be probably back into a dry period again. And so a lot of these topics that we're talking about they're just good conservation topics, but they also really help us to make sure that when we go through these dry periods, we're well prepared and we can address the water needs that we have. So we talked about our water consumption. One of the things that we haven't touched on, though, is the growth that we've seen in Edmond. So Edmond's grown a lot in the past 20 years, about 35% growth from 68,000 to about 92,000 over the last 20 years. So if you've lived here during that time period, you've probably seen that in the traffic. You've seen a lot of growth that's happened in the community. So the city's been making a lot of investments in infrastructure to try to meet these water demands. So there's currently over $400 million worth of projects that are going on to upgrade and expand the water handling capacity for both drinking water and wastewater. So it's an important topic for the city of Edmond, and they want to make sure they continue to utilize the water resources as efficiently as possible. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to hand it over to my colleague here. This is Josh Campbell. He is one of our county extension agents for Oklahoma County, so that serves the Edmond area as well. And he's going to lead our discussion today related to how do we deal with these shady areas in the landscape and what are some ways that we can deal with that effectively. So I'll hand it over to him.
Thank you, Dr. Moore.
Thank you. Too kind.
Well, Dr. Moore did a really nice job of kind of leading us into our discussion for today. As he said, you think about water conservation, and for some people that can be very abstract, trying to figure out what that means for them, where they live, how they manage water use in their landscapes. But as we've shown through our courses this summer, and as we'll continue to do working with the City of Oklahoma City, is we'll dive into some specific topics, and hopefully you'll see from that water conservation plays a role in all sorts of things. And so today, talking specifically about dealing with shady and difficult areas in the landscape, show of hands, how many people have some sort of situation they're trying to manage just like this, right? you're here because you have an interest in that. And so this probably resonates with most of you. And you may or may not be aware, but managing turf in the shade, like we'll talk about, usually requires using things like tall fescue, which just by nature, because of the type of grass that it is going to require more water to manage than, say, a Bermuda grass or other warm season grasses. So just right off the bat, you're already setting yourself up for a need for more water use. But we'll give you some management tips today and some things to consider that will help you have success managing turf grass in the shade. The first thing I like to point out to people is that you really have to understand what your goals are. You can oftentimes, with the right amount of effort, right amount of expense and inputs and labor, all of those things, can achieve really nice aesthetic results. But like anything in life, if you put one thing as a priority, it comes at the expense of something else, right? And so if aesthetics and the maximum beauty is going to be your number one goal, then it's going to automatically require a little bit more labor and more management, and so it's going to tip those scales a little bit. If low maintenance is absolutely your number one goal, you're probably going to suffer a little bit in terms of the aesthetics and the beauty and quality of your landscape. But that's okay. You can find a balance where you can achieve both. Or if the scales are out of balance for you, that's okay. You just have to be aware of that going in. And so really clearly define your goals. So whether it's low maintenance, reducing your water usage, saving your household money on your monthly water bill, whatever your goals are, think about those and allow that to inform how you proceed with your management. So we're in a boxing ring here, right? We've got shade versus turf grass. Shade's almost always going to win. Shade's just a heavyweight. All turf grasses are going to grow best generally in moderate to full sun conditions. Even the grasses that we call shade grasses can only tolerate a certain threshold of shade before they start to suffer. Like anything, plants require a certain amount of sunlight in order to photosynthesize and to take to bring in that sunlight and make energy for themselves and grow. And so as a result, turf grasses just are naturally going to be difficult things to establish and grow in the shade. But it is possible. We add the unique fact that we happen to be in Oklahoma, which is known as the transition zone. It's this nice little belt across the middle of the United States where our winters are just too cold to establish warm season grasses year round. If we go south to the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area and south, there are some warm season grasses that can be grown in shady areas that you can have just about year round and have a green color and look. We also have summers that are often too warm and too arid to successfully maintain a healthy stand of cool season or shade grasses year round. And so we have this beautiful struggle of constantly having to manage that. If you go just a little bit north, say Wichita or Kansas City, you start to come out of the transition zone. As you go south towards Dallas, you come out of it as well. So we're just in this nice, beautiful belt in the central U.S. where we struggle with the extremes of both hot and cold, which make managing turf grass difficult. And like the graph that Dr. Moore showed you, that's a nice visual illustration of exactly how our weather patterns work. You've all seen this fact sheet. Most of what we'll be talking about today will be directly covered in this fact sheet. And we have other resources to kind of amend and support your efforts to learn more about this topic. So I'd encourage you to read through this fact sheet by the end of today and take it home, highlight it, mark it up, and use it as kind of a simple guide and framework for how you go about making decisions on managing the turf grass in the shade in your landscapes. And like Dr. Moore said, on the top right of this fact sheet, there's this box here, and that is our OSU fact sheet website. We, at every county in Oklahoma has a county extension office, and you'll notice on the back of your folders that you received today, Every one of Oklahoma's 77 counties has an office. These offices are listed here, phone number. You happen to be in Oklahoma County, so you can call our Oklahoma County office Monday through Friday. We'll have master gardeners and trained staff in different areas that are available to assist you, help you answer and address questions. However, we're not a 24-hour hotline, so when I'm in bed at midnight and you're thinking about your grass while you're laying in bed at midnight, rather than calling or emailing me, start with the fact sheet website, okay? That's a great place to start, and most of the time, with a little bit of effort on your part, you can figure out the basic information you need from this website. And so I'd encourage everybody to always start here. Coming back to turf grass, you may have heard these terms before, but when we talk about turf grass, there's really two things to consider. There are cool season turf grasses, and there are warm season turf grasses. And really simply that means that the cool season grasses, as you can see here on the bottom left, are going to have their most active growth in the late winter and early spring, and in the late summer, fall, and early winter. And the warm season grasses are going to do their most active growth over here on the right, you see, during the late spring through the summer and into the late summer, early fall. So their maximum growing times are going to be different. Now, shade grasses are naturally going to have a little bit more shade tolerance generally when compared to warm season grasses. But one thing I'd like to point out, and that may help you understand why that could be, is what are trees and other things in the landscape doing during the maximum growing period for warm season grasses? They're leafed out, right? Their canopies are full of leaves. They are in their densest point of growth, whereas they start to put on leaves, in here, and they start to drop their leaves here. So when the cool season grasses over here on the left again are growing at their most optimum time, they aren't having to compete as much for sunlight as the warm season grasses are during their optimum growing time period. So that just gives you, a little bit of understanding of what's going on and why cool season grasses can naturally have a little bit better tolerance to shade when compared to warm season grasses. That being said, warm season grasses are always going to be the best option in a full sun site. And even to some degree in partial or light shade if you can figure out a way to establish them there, because like I said earlier, they're going to require a lot less maintenance overall in terms of the ongoing irrigation, in terms of their ability to withstand periods of drought. And so it's always best when possible, when given the option of both, to err on the side of warm season grasses. I would always encourage you to do that. Bermuda grass in the peak of summer is going to require about half as much water to maintain as tall fescue. So you automatically look at your conventional 1 inch a week of water during the peak summer season for Bermuda grass in order to maintain it, keep it green and healthy looking. You double that to about 2 or more inches for tall fescue. And so cool season grasses, on the other hand, are going to be much better at shade. And tall fescue is by far the most commonly used shade grass here. There are a few other options which we'll get into later, but the reason tall fescue is most commonly used is that it's well adapted here. Compared to other cool season grasses, it is a little bit more tolerant of dry drought. It can put on really deep taproot, so it can get moisture from a little bit deeper profiles in the soil. It just competes better than other cool season grasses generally. Now zoysia, you may have heard of it, you may not have, but it is a warm season grass that probably of the grasses that we can grow here in central Oklahoma, really there are 3 warm season turf grasses that we can grow, and that's Bermuda grass, the most common turf grass we're going to see across lawns in Oklahoma. You may also see buffalo grass, which is less common, but it is a native turf type grass, and many people use it in areas where they're trying to reduce maintenance because it requires very little irrigation, very little mowing. Its maximum growing height is about 10 to 12 inches. And so it's a great grass, but it has 0 tolerance for shade, and it has little tolerance for heavy traffic. And so because of that, it can make it a less desirable grass to use, even though it is a native here to Oklahoma. Zoysia, on the other hand, is the most shade tolerant of the warm season grasses that we have the ability to use successfully here in Oklahoma. And so, for instance, to give you some ideas of where I know zoysia is used here in the metro area, if you've ever been to the Oklahoma City Bombing Memorial and you've walked through the area where the chairs are, they had to use zoysia there because the shade cast from those chairs was enough that Bermuda would not be able to successfully establish there, but the zoysia was able to establish there. They use zoysia also on some of the Civic Center grounds right in the downtown Oklahoma City area. So those are two areas I know right off the top of my head you could go and see zoysia here in Oklahoma City. Like I said, it does have a little bit greater shade tolerance, but even zoysia has to have some sunlight. And so really you're looking at, you need 6, 7, or even 8 hours more of sunlight a day in order to successfully maintain a zoysia grass. So let's look at Bermuda a little bit more closely. Bermuda grass, again, is a warm season grass, and its strengths, like I said, are that it has both heat and drought tolerance. You could have not irrigated your Bermuda grass for this whole dry spell that we've had after our intensely rainy spring. We had a pretty dry summer with the exception of a few timely rains. And if you hadn't irrigated, your Bermuda grass probably would have gotten pretty close to goldening out. But with these last rains we've had, for instance, I did not irrigate really at all over this last dry spell that we've had over the summer. These timely rains have really greened my yard back up. It has the ability to essentially go into a state of hibernation, to some sort of dormancy, hold on to that energy, and then when the conditions are right, it can green back up. So just because your grass is yellowing out if you have Bermuda grass doesn't mean it's dying. It just means it's a coping mechanism. It has an ability to withstand intense heat and periods of drought. And you also know this can be a strength or a curse. If you're a gardener, sometimes Bermuda can be a curse because it has an intense ability to proliferate both through its underground and above ground running roots, and then it can propagate depending on the type you have by seed sometimes. And so it is very aggressive, and so it's perfect for establishing a lawn area, but it can be a cuss word in a garden flower bed. So that can be a strength or a weakness depending on how you look at it. Its main weaknesses, though, are its poor shade tolerance. If you could have Bermuda grass that was susceptible or that was tolerant of moderate shade here in Oklahoma, it would be a great thing. And there are some work to push Bermuda grass to the edge of its shade tolerance. And so some examples of that, there's a lot of work being done with hybrid Bermuda grasses to improve their shade tolerance. Some of the grasses that you may hear about as you look for different types of Bermuda grass that's available are some of the varieties that are developed right here in Oklahoma at Oklahoma State University. We have a world-class Bermuda grass breeding team and turfgrass research facility. Some of the grasses that have been put out by Oklahoma State University include Latitude 36, which is a sod or vegetative type Bermuda grass. And you can also get Yukon or Riviera, which are seeded types. And based on some studies and research that's been done, those have shown to have some increased tolerance to shade compared to other Bermuda grasses. So don't take that as, hey, I can buy one of these and then I can put it in and it's going to survive in any kind of shade conditions. What I mean by that is those compared to other Bermuda grasses that are out there are going to have improved shade tolerance. Now looking at zoysia again. Zoysia grass has a little bit limier green color typically than Bermuda grass, pointy blades. Its main strengths again are its heat and drought tolerance and its ability to withstand fairly withstand light to moderate shade conditions. Its main weakness is that it's really, really slow to establish and it can be more expensive. Certainly seed and sod can be more expensive than Bermuda grass. It takes, if you were to start from seed, maybe 2 years even or longer to establish a full stand of zoysia grass because it is such a slow grower when compared to things like Bermuda grass. And so that's the main weakness is if you're going to do it, oftentimes you just go full out sod, and even then the establishment period of zoysia grass can be much longer, and the care period you have to put into it can be much longer than Bermuda grass. Tall fescue. Its strengths, it has shade tolerance and it has cold tolerance. So if you are the kind of person that wants green grass year round, your best option is to have some sort of tall fescue stand, or to, you can get into things like overseeding with perennial rye over Bermuda grass and things, but that becomes very expensive and very costly. And most homeowners are going to just opt for using a tall fescue. However, its main weaknesses are going to be that it has poor heat and drought tolerance relative to warm season grasses. So it is, when compared to other cool season grasses, fairly drought and heat tolerant, but it's not going to stand up at all compared to warm season grasses. So you put them under the same stress conditions, tall fescue and say Bermuda or zoysia, those two are going to hold up better than tall fescue all the time. The other issues that are a big problem with tall fescue are disease pressures. If you're over irrigating, and this is where timely, effective irrigation in the summer is really, really important if you're trying to maintain tall fescue. If you are over irrigating, you set yourself up for all sorts of issues like brown patch disease, other fungal diseases that occur on tall fescue regularly. And even if you're just irrigating at the optimum rate and the optimum time, there's having some susceptibility to those diseases, because what happens is our warm temperatures in the summertime combined with humidity right at the soil surface is a perfect recipe for fungal diseases on cool season grasses. And so that's just a struggle that you may have to deal with to some degree if you're managing tall fescue. And the other thing is overseeding. You may get lucky and have a period of a year or two where you have a really nice stand of grass, but in order to maintain a continuous green stand, because of the stress that we do have from disease and our summertime temperatures and things, you probably will have your tall fescue start to get patchy here and there. And it requires, if not seasonal, at least every few years doing overseeding to reestablish and reseed the area and develop a green stand of grass. And so those are some of the issues that you face with tall fescue. One thing I want you to note down here at the bottom, and you may not be able to see it, but right here on your slides that you have with you today, and on the bottom left, I just kind of put a little bit of a note that sometimes it's a good option to consider using a tall fescue seeded blend. And what I mean by that is it's mixed with, so it's a turf type tall fescue mixed with other things like a Kentucky blue, or sometimes even you'll find it with perennial rye and things, but typically it's Kentucky bluegrass. And what that does is it helps the tall fescue to have a better chance of continuous green and establishment. The conditions that are optimal, microclimates in your landscape that are optimal for tall fescue may be not optimal for Kentucky blue, and vice versa. And so when you add a little bit of a blend, you can kind of give yourself maybe a leg up in your establishment and your success rate. And so some of the blends, there's a bunch out there, but one that I know of is called Heartland Supreme. It's a tall fescue, turf type tall fescue blend that is often recommended by our turf specialists at OSU. And Heartland Supreme is readily available at stores, seed stores and things. So again, just to give you a visual, when we talk about relative shade tolerance of cool and warm season grasses, most of the cool season grasses, when compared to warm season grasses, are going to be in that good category. Okay, so cool season grasses are naturally going to be the best option for shady conditions in terms of their performance in shady conditions. Zoysia is going to be somewhere in that middle ground. And over here on the far right, Bermuda and buffalo grass are going to be in the poor performing side of things. So what does that mean for you? I've come up with 10 steps, and they're actually from that fact sheet there that you have, that you can think about. If you can address all 10 of these steps, you should be able to you should be able to either be successful or throw your hands up and try something else. And so we'll walk through that. So of course, we've talked a lot about turf grasses up to now. And so the number one you see here on this list is just choosing the right turf type, the right plant type. So if you're trying to successfully grow Bermuda under dense shade, you haven't checked the first box. You have two options. You can go on to step 2, which is maybe what I would recommend to do first, and that is to think about removing some of the shade, maybe thinning out some of the canopy, or raising up some of the lower limbs. Or you can try tall fescue. But like I said, even tall fescue requires some sunlight in order to be established. One thing you'll notice here in this picture is the lowest limbs on these trees are going to be at like the 10-foot mark. So even here where they are establishing this beautiful stand of tall fescue, they aren't trying to grow turf right up against the base of the trees in most cases. You can see these beds where they've planted plants, and they've got the limbs up high, and the canopy is relatively thin to allow some sunlight through. So those are some things to consider. If you've got really, really overgrown trees, densely grown trees, and you've got a lot of them together, even tall fescue is going to be very difficult to establish under that. Some of the things you can do, again, is increase mowing height. So if you raise up your mowing height, you're putting less stress on the turf grass every time you mow, which is giving it the ability to put down deeper roots, give it a fighting chance at surviving in that shady area. It's also going to require less irrigation because you're holding more moisture there. Fertilizing more lightly but more frequently. When you fertilize lightly, you put also less stress on the grass. You're forcing less vegetative growth out of it. And so you do need some nutrients depending on what your soil conditions are and if you've done a soil test, but typically you have less fertility needs in shady areas. And then also foot traffic. Every time you can walk across your grass. That we wouldn't have grass if it weren't for walking across it, right? That's why we have grass. But you want to minimize playing rugby right here, or go-karts or those types of things. You're going to tear up the grass. You're going to compact the soils. You're going to put undue stress on this grass. And plants are kind of like people. We're pretty resilient in that one thing may not stress our bodies out too much, but when you couple that one thing with another one thing and another one thing, there's always that needle that breaks the camel's back, right? Or is that the term? The needle, the straw? The straw. Camel through an eye of a needle, straw on the camel's back. That's it. Anyway, I'm not known for my wisdom poetry, so I'll move on to something else. But you get the idea that too much stress can be a burden on your turf grasses. Irrigating efficiently, again, I won't spend too much time on that, but if you irrigate efficiently, you're going to reduce the susceptibility of the turf grass in these areas to disease pressures. Reducing weeds. One, irrigating efficiently is going to naturally help reduce weeds, but when you reduce weeds, you're also putting less competition for the nutrients and the moisture in the soil on the turf grass that you're trying to maintain. Also, removing leaves and other debris. If you can do that, there's more sunlight available. There's less harboring of disease pathogens and things, fungal disease, if you can remove some of that debris. And then overseeding and sodding are going to be something you'll probably have to consider if you're trying to maintain a tall fescue like this on a continuous basis. You're probably going to have to overseed once a year or once every other year. And then lastly, if you tried all these things and you're just committed to turf grass under your trees in your landscape, if you tried all of these things and they're still not working, best bet for you is going to be to just sit down, put your feet up, and try something different. Life's too short. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you a question? You talk about fertilize more lightly but more frequently. Is that going from like a 40 down to a 13, 13, 13 or a 10, 10, 10?
You could do that more so like, when you get fertilizer recommendations, typically you think about on, say, a Bermuda grass, like 1 pound of nitrogen for every 1,000 square feet is kind of without a soil sample, kind of the conventional wisdom. You might look at just kind of halving those rates or something and doing it a little bit more often. But really what I would recommend there, that's kind of a rule of thumb, what I'd recommend there is starting with a soil sample. And you can do that through any county extension office, and we'll really be able to give you a pinpoint precision on exactly what the needs are going to be in that situation. Yes, sir?
So you're going to dwell on the irrigate efficiently, some tips on how to do that?
Sure, I can give a few tips on that. We've had 3 or 4 classes this summer where we've really dove into that, and then we will continue to have classes on that in the future. So one thing I'd recommend doing is going to the edmondwater.com/conservation classes. All of the previous workshops that Dr. Moore and I have taught here are cataloged there on video, as you can see, and you can watch those and you can get information. And so I'd recommend you starting there, but some basic tips would be irrigating in the morning. So in the morning time, you're gonna have lower wind speeds, you're gonna have a little bit more quickness of dry off of the leaf surfaces. So if you're irrigating in the evening or in the overnight, you have a longer period of time where that water could be standing at the soil surface or on the leaf blades before the sun comes out and drives the surface of those leaves, which is going to reduce the susceptibility of things like your turf to disease and things like that. Knowing your soil type. So if you have a really compacted, heavy clay soil, you're going to have to irrigate much smaller run times, because it might only be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and your soil has reached its capacity to take in that water. Its infiltration rate is so low because it's a heavy clay compacted soil that you're not going to be able to get that much water in it. So for instance, if you have a heavy rain and you ever see water ponding on your lawn after a half-inch rain or something, that's a sign you probably have either a compacted or a really dense, tight soil. And so you're going to maybe have to think about reducing your run times from, say, 20 or 30 minutes to half or less, and doing that spread out over a period of time. We'd call that a cycle and soak approach. The other extreme would be if you have a really sandy soil, then your water is going to flow through that soil really quickly, and you may have to think about your run times and your irrigation scheduling differently. You may have to water more frequently. So there are a lot of management things that we don't have time to get into specifically today, but certainly you can find a lot of those resources through our other fact sheets on the videos from past classes, and then you can catch me afterwards and I'd be happy to talk through that with you. So shade removal. Anyone completely opposed to doing this kind of thing in your landscape in order to improve turf? Completely opposed to it, okay. So then you would probably move on to other things down the list and find yourself wherever you fall down that list. But we'll talk about shade removal really quickly. Now, I'm not talking about taking a chainsaw to your tree, but it's like giving trees a haircut. I get my haircut every couple months when my wife makes me, and it makes me look better. And the trees with a haircut every now and again are going to look better, and they're also going to allow turf grass to grow better under their canopy. And so you can do some things like strategic thinning, where you're kind of opening up some of the really dense small limb growth in here, and also limbing up so that you've got lower limbs, which allows more of the side sunlight through. Basic things like that, just basic amounts of pruning. You'd be surprised at how much additional sunlight that would let in without really compromising the aesthetic quality of the tree cover and the area, and can really improve the success of your turf grass there. And I also would encourage you, when you look around town, all over Edmond, you'll see good and bad examples of this. And all over Oklahoma City, as you go around town, look for places that have really beautiful turf grass under trees, and I promise you will find that those limbs are at least 6, 7, 8 feet off the ground. The canopy has been thinned out a little bit, and they look gorgeous, and they still provide shade, they still provide the function that you want, but they've done these things. Where the turf grass is dirt, it's bare soil and it looks bad, or they've had to just resort to a mulch cover, they haven't done these things. So you choose what you want, but the options are out there for you, and I'm giving you the options here today. For you, so you've said it's not an option for you, so you may have a personal commitment to protecting certain limbs and things in your landscape, and I totally respect that. Or it may be even more complicated than that. You have a building, your house is next to another house, or the way it's built, it casts shade so that you have no ability to remove or thin that shade. Maybe there's a big dense growth of trees, and no matter how much limbing you do, you're still going to have shade. And so those are real problems that you need to consider. Now, when you selectively prune trees, You can do less pruning and successfully maintain cool season grasses like we've discussed. You can do a little bit higher up pruning and thinning and probably get to a threshold where you can successfully maintain a warm season grass. So you can kind of think about both options, but you're going to have to do more pruning in order to get a warm season grass to establish more sunlight in there. Like I said, you're going to need at least 6 or more hours of sunlight a day to establish zoysia grass, which is going to be the most shade tolerant of the warm season grasses that we have available to us. So maybe you've tried some of those things, or you refuse to think about limbing the tree, and your yard looks like this. At this point, I said, let's stop. This is the definition of insanity. You tried all these things, and you're still getting results like this. Or maybe you haven't tried things and you're getting results like this. Think about some of the other options available to you. You know, maybe you're at a point in your life where you're looking for lower maintenance landscapes. You're trying to reach some sort of happy medium of beautiful yard that you can appreciate and enjoy with low cost, lower time maintenance commitment. And so here are some of the alternatives that I think are great to consider, and that will be detailed in that fact sheet that you were provided today. You can use large mulched areas under the drip line of trees. And I think this is a really beautiful and attractive way to not fight turf grass under trees. One, you're not having to weed eat or mow right up to the trunk of a tree as much. And they can add just really nice texture and elements to the landscape. And as trees grow, you're not having as much foot traffic. You're not having to pull the mower under there, so you're actually aiding in the health and the long-term success of the root systems and things of that tree as well. You can also consider the addition of hardscapes. So I like hardscapes for a number of reasons. You think about like side yards where you've got a fence, you've got your house, maybe you've got tree cover, and there's just no way that you can maintain, even tall fescue, it gets torn up, it gets beat up, and it's just maybe a few foot path or strip, and rather than spending money to irrigate that area and turn it into mud, hardscapes are a good option for those types of areas. Or, they can be a good alternative for just adding to the landscape and reducing areas that you have to commit to mowing into turf. So hardscapes are a good option. And then lastly, I would say under tree areas, if you want to add another layer of maintenance but also beauty, is putting some permanent perennial shade landscape beds in. You can opt for this, and I think this looks beautiful. It's going to be a lot lower maintenance, but if you want to take it a step further, you could go with something like that. So there are options available to you. Here's some examples again. Mulched areas, just right under the drip line of trees, you can come out with mulch, and you can even plant some in that, or you can not plant in it at all. You can kind of do a hybrid where you may put seasonal bulbs or something, but there are options available to you. Some of the advantages of shade. So we've talked a lot about the problems that are associated with shades, but I'm an optimist. There's always two sides to every coin, and so if there's downsides to shade, there's got to be some advantages, and we're aware of these advantages because we're here wanting to know how we can work with the shade that we have. We're not the take chainsaws to the trees kind of folks. So you can have as much as 20-degree temperature difference in a shady area of the landscape. So you think about the hot summer and enjoying being outside and enjoying your landscape. Having established shade cover can really allow you to benefit and enjoy your landscape in times where otherwise you wouldn't be able to. If it's 100 degrees outside, 110 degrees outside, you might be able to tolerate 80 or 90 degrees, with some breeze under the shade versus full sun out in that heat. You wouldn't be able to tolerate it. Plants in the shade, with the exception of comparing tall fescue or a cool season grass to a warm season grass, plants in the shade are naturally going to require less water as a whole. And the reason for that is they have less evaporative loss, right? There's less sunlight on those plants, on the soil, so you have less evaporative loss, and so they're just naturally going to require less water as a whole in general. And then there are a lot of shade option plants, which we'll get into here in just a second. I think a lot of people think you can't have color in the shade, and I've learned over the years that you really can have beautiful color. You have to think a little bit differently. It's not going to be quite the same as a full sun, say, butterfly garden where you've got all sorts of action and color going on. But there's some color that you can add to your landscape with shade gardens. And oftentimes it's a contrast, a subtle contrast of color. But I wanted to show you some examples of that I felt like were good approaches to and good options to consider. This is a Master Gardener tour that took place in Logan County. And this family, rather than trying to fight turf here and have, and up here as well, rather than trying to fight turf in these areas, they've opted for a combination of mulch and planted beds and things. So they've cut down on their mowing maintenance, and they've committed to these established beds that really, once established, are really only requiring seasonal maintenance a few key times throughout the year rather than weekly mowing, weekly watering, things like that. Here's some other maybe really extreme options. I say extreme in that they've committed to a lot of plants and really making this look beautiful. You can do ground covers like you see here on the bottom right, and then put in annual plants around the border and things, or some statues and art fixtures. You can commit to foliage, shade plants, and add color with the different contrasts of greens. Hardscapes. Hardscapes are going to be any material in the landscape that's hard. So it could be woods, it could be metal, it could be rocks, it could be stones, brick, pathways. And you can do a lot of really neat things in shady areas with hardscapes. I like this picture. It's a really good example of, rather than trying to mow this side yard area and commit it to turf, they've turned it into a bed right there against the fence, a bed right here at the house, and a hardscape path in between. And with a little bit of upfront labor and effort and cost to establish this, they've saved themselves years of mowing and headache down the road. Just some other pictures and examples. This I thought was really cool. So again, this homeowner was fighting shade really heavily here, and they turned it into a patio area. And so there's some options available to you. This is our extension center here in Oklahoma City, and we have this really kind of wind tunnel courtyard area that was awkward that we inherited when our building was built, and we've been slowly transitioning it into kind of a light shade garden. We call our Oklahoma Proven Garden, and we are using hardscapes. As you can see here on the top right, we're using hardscapes and pergola that will grow vining plants over, and at some time in the future, once it establishes, will be a really beautiful area. Hardscapes can also be stones or retaining walls, and they can be used strategically in the landscape to create height or to create different feels for your landscape. That picture is from my front yard earlier this year. So if you're looking for plants, the City of Edmond on their water conservation or their conservation website has a drought-tolerant plant database. It's called a drought-tolerant plant database, but there are a number of shade plant options that are low maintenance that are available here on this website. So we've worked with, OSU put together a physical book publication, and they've taken that publication and turned it into a database on the website where you as City of Edmond customers can search and access information about plants. So you go here, it's just edmondwater.com/conservation, and then you'll come here and you can click on the Drought Tolerant Plant Database tab, and then it'll take you to this, and you can set your search criteria. You can say, okay, I want only perennial plants, so I want plants that are going to come back year after year, and I want plants that can work in full sun to partial shade or in partial to full shade. I am okay with any soil type. I don't care if it's native to Oklahoma or if it can be from wherever, and I selected any for season of interest. So it might be a winter bloomer, it might be a spring bloomer, so you can control all of those search criteria. And then once you do that, it will generate plants that work according to those conditions for you. And then you start to get a feel for, okay, I like the look of this, I don't like the look of this, this would work for me, this won't work for me. And it's all available here on the website. You can actually let's say this top plant here I wanted to select, I could click directly on that plant. There'll be a scrolling list of the plants that meet your search criteria. I find one here on the top that I want to select, so I select it. It highlights it and gives you more detailed information about that plant. You can look at a number of different pictures. Some of them have 2 or 3 or 4 pictures. It'll tell you the light requirement, so this one can be partial shade. It'll tell you whether it has benefit to wildlife, and so this one has some natural benefit to birds. It's native to the US, and it just gives you all of these information and comments about it that you can then take to inform you and decide if that's a plant that would work for you in your situation. Some other resources, I'd encourage you to go to oklahomaproven.org. The Oklahoma State University has developed the Oklahoma Proven Plant Selection Series. Over the last 20 years, our horticulturalists at the university have been selecting a plant from different categories, so an annual, perennial, a tree, and a shrub for every year that has shown itself to be well adapted to the growing conditions here in Oklahoma. So they select 4 plants a year, every year, and they've been doing it since 1999. So this happens to be the 20th year that we've done that. And we've cataloged them all here. So on the website, or you can actually get this PDF or print copy, and you can see pictures and get information on all of these plants. There's the website, the front page, and you can go plants by year or plants by category. And so you can search by 1999 or 2000, or you can search by perennial, annual, and it's all available there for you. That's my presentation. I've got a few last slides I'd like to go over with you that kind of reinforce how we can serve you as City of Edmond customers or people who live in Oklahoma City Metro. And then I'll take a few questions. So many of you may be familiar and many of you may not be familiar with what the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service is. So we actually, our formation, my job, goes all the way back to the 1860s when President Abraham Lincoln and Congress formed the Morrill Act, which established that every state and U.S. territory would be mandated to have an institution that would serve its state citizens, one through providing college education, but also to providing research and research-based information to everyday citizens. And so that's what our mission is. So we are one of the branches of Oklahoma State University, and our federal mandate, what we do every day is just serve Oklahomans. And so we're like it's the service-based branch of the university. So we're extending the university to large and small communities across the state in a number of different areas. So it's from agriculture to business to youth development, anything in between. We have resources that can help you. And so our website there, you can go find more information about what the Cooperative Extension Service is. And we also have a calendar on there. You can go and see that calendar and see every class and event we're doing across the state. And you can actually search that calendar by county. You can search the calendar by topics. You could say gardening or cattle or horses or whatever, and it will trigger and it'll say, yeah, we have these events going on these dates. You can register right here, and it's got all of that for you, and you can access it right there. Dr. Moore mentioned this at the very beginning, and this is the fact sheet website I was telling you about. On the front of the Managing Turfgrass in the Shade fact sheet that you received is the web address, and it'll take you here to this page. And there will be a search bar right there, and you can search any topic that you're interested in. So if it's turfgrass or if it's irrigation, you put your search in there and it'll generate fact sheets and publications for you to download for free to access. What I love about the site is when you first come to the site, now this is an old screenshot, but over here on the far left, you can see recently added or updated. It actually will list the most recently added fact sheets. So the newest publications that we have on here will be there. And then it also has trending now. So you can see the most searched by the minute, most searched topics. And oftentimes people have an issue they're dealing with in their landscape, or they have, maybe their tree has something going on. If you go here and you look for trending now, there's probably going to be other people like you searching for information, and it might be in this trending now section. Now, once you decide what you want to search, you put that information in. So let's search Managing Turfgrass in the Shade. It'll bring up this publication right here. You can click on it, click that link there. Once you click on the link, it'll take you to the fact sheet. Or, you can search other turfgrass topics, and so these are other of the dozens and dozens of turfgrass fact sheets right here that show up when you do that search. And you can click on any one of them and it'll pull up a PDF for you to look at, and then you can go and you can print it, or you can save it. You can share it on Facebook, Twitter, you can do any of those things. And so it's a resource there for you to use. Another thing, I'd encourage you to, if you're less of a reading type and the fact sheets, the white and black paper fact sheets aren't your thing and you're not a reader, but you enjoy video content, we have a number of resources in video content on our YouTube channel. We have a Saturday morning and Sunday afternoon television show called Oklahoma Gardening. And that television show, it airs at 11 a.m. on PBS, goes out nationwide, and it airs again on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. You can catch that 1 hour broadcast and learn kind of timely gardening topics, but then all of those videos, and some that never make it to the TV show, actually get cataloged on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel, and they're broken down by topic. So rather than having to wade through a whole hour-long TV program to catch a specific clip about growing grass, you can search. So here, if you go to the Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel, you just search Oklahoma Gardening on YouTube, it'll come to this page, and you can search internally within our Oklahoma Gardening channel on a topic, just like you did on the fact sheet database. So I've put in irrigation, and again, all of these videos on irrigation pop up, and you can click on those videos, and you'll learn everything from drip irrigation to efficient irrigation, irrigation controller programming. We have videos on all of these topics that you can access and use to inform you and help you. You can also catch me every Wednesday on Fox 25, Living Oklahoma. I have a brief segment, usually around the 9:30 to 9:45 hour, and I talk about 5 minutes on gardening topics. And so I do that every Wednesday on Fox 25, and then you can catch us at our office. You can pop by our 2500 Northeast 63rd Street location here in Oklahoma City, and we'd love to help you with any issues, help you with a soil sample. If you have a home well, we can run water quality samples for you and help you figure out what you need to do to get your drinking water or irrigation water in shape. We can help you with a number of different things. And you can also call us. We have master gardeners on that answer the phones Monday through Friday, and then if they're not able to assist you, then of course you would be passed to me or one of the other educators.